Welcome back, everybody, to Clearwater Jazz Holiday's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. Today's guests are Alejandro Arenas and Ona Kirei, and the topic is creating music in a collaborative environment. Part 1, composition with Orilla. So welcome, guys. It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you too.
So we've got everyone muted for the courtesy of the session, but of course questions can be submitted using the chat feature. We'll try to answer those. We really appreciate everybody watching these sessions, band directors, students, and everybody else. If you want a specific session that's catered to something you're interested in, just email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com and we'll try to put something together for you. You can check out all of these upcoming free sessions at clearwaterjazz.com/education. And as always, we like to thank the sponsors of these online resources, Duke Energy, Blue Water, Wealth Management at Steward Partners, for making these resources available for everybody for free. And you can also listen to all of these sessions on the Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions podcast, available wherever you stream, and that's presented by our great partner, Marine Max Clearwater. So we've got Alejandro and Ona back with us. They are part of a collaborative duo, and this project is called Orilla. So we have vocalist Ona Kirei and bassist Alejandro Arenas. Their material is as diverse as their own backgrounds. The highly inventive arrangements and compositions showcase a sophisticated interplay, and we're really fortunate to have them with us. A little bit about them both. Alejandro was born in Colombia. He relocated to the United States in 2001, where he became an in-demand upright and electric bassist. He has backed artists as diverse as Dick Hyman, Diego Figueiredo, Randy Brecker, Mary Stallings, Ken Paplowski, and many others. In addition to being a composer and arranger, he is an adjunct professor for the Mira program at St. Petersburg College. He's also the co-leader of the award-winning band La Lucha and has performed in many national and international music festivals, including the Clearwater Jazz Holiday Music Festival and our Wonderlust concert series. And vocalist, composer, and arranger Ona Kirei was born in Barcelona, Spain. She has appeared at numerous music festivals all across Europe and the United States. Ona has received several awards, including first place in both the Talavera Jazz Contest as well as Actua, a music competition for the Spanish national radio station Cadena Ser. You can watch many of Alejandro's past virtual sessions in the studio, and he and Ona have also done one together as Orilla called Voice and Bass, Doing More with Less. So we welcome them back to our Clearwater Jazz Holidays Young Lions program. Orilla, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Steve. All right. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about composition. So as Steve mentioned in the bio, this is a collaborative project, meaning there's no musical director here per se. We're both equal partners in this. So we happen to be able to get along musically really well because of a variety of reasons that we're going to explain as we talk about this. But for this particular masterclass, we decided to write a song to showcase kind of how we work together. So Ona came up with a poem by a wonderful Argentinian poet.
Alfonsina Storni. Yeah.
And she was also the inspiration for the famous Latin American standard, Alfonsina y el Mar.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, why did we decide to start with a poem?
So we decided we start with a poem because we have a concept that we can start with and we can inspire ourselves on that concept. The poem itself, it has its own rhythm. So we are starting with something, and this is a collaborative way to compose, right? So this way we can participate in the creation of the music equally with having that concept and that material already there.
And particularly because thematically the poem is already expressing something a a feeling that we can both perceive differently. It's not what Ona is feeling at the moment that she wants to express herself as the lyricist, because she writes, usually when we write songs, you write the lyrics. I'm not that good with lyrics, but we know our strengths and weaknesses, and that's why part of the collaboration works so well, that we are able to accept those things. So I know she's going to write something better. Of course, if I have suggestions or anything like that, I can suggest, like, well, why don't you use this word or something like that? But we haven't really found ourselves in that situation. But in this particular case, that was the cool thing about the poem. It's already something, right? Like you said.
Yeah, it's a concept we both connected with.
Exactly.
I send like several poems and I say, hey, check this out. And we both connected with this particular poem. So.
And the poem is called Paz, which translates to peace. And do you want to do a quick translation of it?
Yeah, sure.
So
I have to read it.
It's originally in Spanish, and what we're gonna do in just a minute, we're gonna play the recording that we did of this, so you'll hear the lyrics in Spanish. But I figure it's better to read it first so that you can get an idea of what you're listening to.
Yeah. So the translation of the poem is: let's go towards the trees, the dream. The word in Spanish is sueño, which has a double meaning. It can mean either dream and sleep at the same time, or either one of those. So the dream or the sleep will emerge within us by celestial virtue. Let's go towards the trees. The night will be light on us, the weightless sadness. Please correct me if I mispronounce something. Let's go towards the trees, the soul that is sleepy because of the wild perfume. But be quiet, don't speak, be pious. Don't wake up the sleeping birds.
So that's basically what the poem is. We'll play. You want to play it first? We're going to play a quick video of this. This is a pre-recorded video that we did specifically for this. Because technology always throws things at us, so we figure it would be better to pre-record it. So here it is.
Vamos hacia los árboles del sueño, se hará en nosotros por virtud celeste. Vamos hacia los árboles, la noche no será blanda, la tristeza leve. Vamos hacia los árboles, el alma adormecida de perfume agreste, pero calla, no hables, sé piadoso, no despiertes a los pájaros que duermen, duermen, duermen.
All right. So, how did we come up with that? Of course, you already know where the lyrics came from. So, in this particular case, we had agreed, we wrote this. I think you sent me the poem on Sunday. Then Monday we agreed to meet just to have a little session, writing session. So, I guess I came up with the first idea, kind of harmonic / a little bit of melodic, which is what you first hear on the bass there. And I actually started this on the upright bass, but being that we have the limitation of the bass, in the video I was playing a 5-string bass that allows me to play some chords, but what I wanted to do is melodically be able to outline the chord changes. And being that the poem is called Peace, pass, I wanted to start with something happy. So I just started with like a couple major chords because that's kind of what I heard. I wanted, okay, what would give me peace? What feels stable and nice and not, dramatic or, feels at ease, makes me feel at ease. So I picked a couple of chords that felt good to me, with like a little, implying a little bit of a melody, but not like anything that's going to intrude with what Ona is going to write over that. And I had just a couple of sections. There's a part towards the end that, there's a part where the word sadness, tristeza, is mentioned, and, talks about the sleeping birds at the end. So I kind of had another part that was kind of minorish sounding, not necessarily sad, but a little bit darker, if you will. But I didn't have anything specific. It wasn't in a specific like time signature. It was just kind of a floating idea. So then we met on Monday, and I showed that to Ona. And what was your perception of that then?
Yeah, I really like his idea, and it's funny how the word peace can immediately suggest different things on both of us, right? For him was happiness, so he wanted to do something happy. For me, it was like calm and space. I needed space, so I said, okay, that's great. I love your idea. Now let's. But his idea was very rhythmic, right? And I said, okay, I need to take that idea now and create a little bit of space. So let's compose a song rubato, so we can really reflect on each word and on each sentence and on the inner rhythm that the poem has already. Like in the first sentence, like there is a comma and there is a space between the first part of the sentence and the last word that connects with the rest, right? So let's honor that while we are composing and creating the melody, taking your idea as our base. And then we will add the rhythm to it, and that's what we did. We started creating that melodically, and I tried to reflect on each word and on the rhythm of the poem while creating the melody.
Exactly, and she came up mostly with the melodic content of this. There were a couple of spots later that at some point we started just kind of trying stuff. We said like, well, let's start creating. So I started playing, and like she mentioned, we started just rubato. So we weren't bound by a rhythm or anything like that. It was kind of like, here's a chord. She'll sing a melody that kind of fits within that chord. Then go into the next chord, and then the cool thing is that at that point it just becomes like experimentation, right? I'll hear something and I'll try to play it, and then that may trigger something melodically different for you. And that happened in a couple of spots that were like, oh, that sounds really cool. So that brings us to this particular point, two ideas that we just talked about, which is, first she said, my idea was good, but for her, she was perceiving something slightly different. So at that point, I, as somebody that's bringing something, I need to be open to her interpretation of what I'm playing, because we need to make sure that we're both saying something we want to say. So I can't be attached to that idea particularly. I can suggest it. It's a suggestion, right? It's not, this is what the song's going to be like.
And I think that's what makes this duo work so well and so organically, that we both think that way. We both bring a lot of ideas to our project, but we are both very open about them. It's like, no, we are not super attached to those ideas. We want them to evolve.
Exactly, to grow organically. And the thing too, this might sound a little bit, I think it's very important to kind of, when we're dealing with music and emotions, I think as instrumentalists particularly, we can get very attached to the theory or a sound that sounds cool on our instrument, but not necessarily be into the vibe of what it is that we're trying to express. We can play a chord that sounds super cool and is super altered and just like, it sounds cool to us. Like it feeds the inner nerdy musician in us. Like, but does it fit? And that's the thing that, as you know, the improvising is very different from writing music in that aspect, in that you are creating something. You are, you know, if you guys have seen videos of Jacob Collier online, he talks a lot about very advanced harmonic and theoretical concepts. But in the end, he says, all these choices I want to make are just based on what I want to feel through the music as a whole, right? So that applies to this, is the fact that we just want to be able to find what fits best. So if I have to just play a major triad, then we just play a major triad.
It's prioritizing the concept instead of the aesthetics.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's not. It's about the song. You write for the song and not for, you know. It's finding that balance, because there's also something cool that we talked about. We're both very much attracted to music that sounds familiar yet has twists and turns that you don't expect, you know. And that's something that we try to create with our music too, because I think we both think very similarly in that sense. That happens a couple of times in this song, actually, where things kind of like go, oh, you don't expect it to go there. And it's cool because that leaves things open for interpretation for the listener as well. Like Ona said at the beginning, her perception of peace was a little bit different than mine. So, but that's the cool thing. That's why it's really cool to create in a collaborative environment, because you have two people, two opinions or two views of the same thing, and you find that middle ground where you can make it work. So let's see what else. Okay, so in terms of the process, right, that we used, we kind of got through the form, through the whole poem. It's a short poem. And again, some of the things were trial and error, right? I think there was like a point where I played some weird chord and she asked me, like, what do you hear melodically? And I sang like a little line, and you kind of based it a little bit on that. And we both like,
in another moment, I was hearing a chord, and he was like, "Hey, wait, let me find it."
Exactly. She was sitting, in the process. She was also sitting at the keyboard, trying to map out what she was hearing. So it's very cool because it took us about an hour, really, to come up with what we have. And now what we have recorded is this. I guess we still just see it as a skeleton.
Yes. Totally.
It's the foundation of the song. Oh, yes, at some point we decided to come up with a rhythm, with like a specific groove for it. And you want to talk a little bit about how we came up to that
rhythm? It was, I don't even remember, to be honest. After, building the skeleton, like more rubato, we just kind of started to play it.
Yeah, I think
and to keep on following the rhythm of the poem, and
it's
very organic.
I think the important thing there was to have a solid melodic and harmonic foundation.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure everything worked before. Well, something we didn't mention at the beginning is that there's a lot of different ways to or maybe we mentioned it, but I'll mention it again if I did, is that there's many different ways. A question we get a lot as writers is, how do you write music? What's your process?
Yeah.
And
it can be so different. It can be very chaotic as well, right? But it's definitely very different to compose yourself when you're alone in your home with your instrument, that doing it in a collaborative environment. It's really, really different.
And, in this particular case, sometimes some people also ask, like, does the harmony come first, or does the groove come first, or does the melody come first? And the answer is that it can be any of those things.
Yeah, I don't know in your case, but in my case, especially lately, probably during the last years, it all happens at the same time. The thing that comes first in my case when I compose by myself is the concept. What do I want to express? express, or what do I need to say, and everything. I start to build everything at the same time. In my case,
And you know, I've worked in my own music. I've done it in different ways. Sometimes I'll come up with a bass line that I like, and I build something around a bass line. Sometimes I come up with a chord progression that I like, and I'll build a melody on that. And sometimes I come up with a melody. And yes, and sometimes it comes like that together. You know, like I said, I don't write lyrically. You know, it's rare that I have I'll have a concept in mind, but you know, so, and I think that maybe since you're thinking lyrically as well, that may help you come up with everything at the same time, because you have a clear idea of what the words mean right off the bat. It's not just a melody that you want to surround by cool things.
Exactly. It's important that everything makes sense, that everything is there for a reason. You were talking before about the unexpected twists of the melody. We did, right? But none of those unexpected twists are there by
random. They're not
they are
random.
not random. They are related to the concept, to the lyrics, to exactly what we're gonna say and what we want to express with this poem. So for me, it's super important that everything makes sense and it's there for a reason, that there's nothing superficial, so to speak.
And that, you know, and again, going back to the concept, you know, we talked a little individually, but then once you bring that together, the difficult thing is that you will find pushback. Sometimes you may find somebody that's going to say, no, I really don't like that. I really don't. And again, I can't stress this enough, because I think that's the most complicated part of being in a collaborative environment. You know, be it that you're in a band, be it that you're a bass player trying to settle a groove with your drummer, you know. It's you're going to get pushback, and you're more than likely, if you want things to work, somebody's going to have to compromise. You're going to have to find a middle ground, and that's okay. You know, ultimately, you got to trust the people that you play with.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something I kind of started mentioning about your mental approach, the well-being of the environment that you're in. It's very important. I know this sounds kind of like, well, we're just talking about jamming. No, it really is important to be focused and kind of in a safe
and let the egos
at the door.
At the door, exactly. Yeah. At the end, we are all music, and we gotta put what we are at the surface of what we are all doing, and just, you know, try to be good people and communicate and compromise, but at the same time, adding ideas.
Yeah, and you know, and if you have an idea you really feel strongly about, also don't be push it in a good way.
It's all about balance at the end.
Exactly.
Finding a balance between, hey, I really believe in this idea of mine, like I really see it, please let's try it. And sometimes it's like, okay, maybe this is not gonna work. Okay, so I'm, you know, if you don't like this, let's put it apart, and maybe for another song.
And the key there that you mentioned is let's try it.
Yeah.
Right? It's to quote Shelley Berg, the wonderful pianist and dean of the School of Music at University of Miami. He was telling telling his students to check out artists, and he said, "Hey man, you don't have to like it, you know, but just try it, give it a chance." And that's the thing, you know. It's all about giving it a chance. That's how we are being creative, you know. That's how we can push things and really create something new. It's make the sum greater. What is the saying? Make the product greater than the sum of the parts, or you know, just create something bigger than yourself in that sense. So being able to, in this particular case, we both come from very different backgrounds and similar but different at the same time. You know, we come from Hispanic cultures but completely different continents, and our perception, for example, when we went to that groove, it was kind of like a little, how would you describe that? So groove in 3, It has a little bit of like maybe almost Andean roots,
Maybe.
or you
I don't know.
or
For me, the three it's very common in Spanish music. So
yeah.
for me, natural. But it's funny that yes, you're right. It was natural in different ways, or we hear that three from different references.
Yes,
Maybe.
exactly. And that was
Yeah.
the when we came up with the groove, that was the easiest part.
Yes.
Because at that point we're performing. We're you know, and you know, the great thing, one of the great things about Ona is that she is also a great instrumentalist in addition to being a wonderful singer and composer. So she is very much aware of time and groove and all these things that unfortunately sometimes singers don't look at, you know, and it's important to, I mean, no, and I'm not bad mouthing. This happens to any instrumentalist. Not to say anything bad about singers, but this
Yes.
happens. It's very easy
It
to get
happens to a
stuck
lot of-
in, right? It's easy to get stuck into what your instrument is, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a wonderful multi-instrumentalist like Ona in order to do those things.
Yeah,
you know?
I think it's difficult. You know, each instrument has a traditional role, so to speak, in a band, and very often singers are asked to be the front people, and they are asked to be very often more of an actor than a musician, right? And that can lead sometimes to work on other things on your instrument, and sometimes work on some things, but miss, the musician part. It doesn't happen all the time, but
No,
it's
no.
true that it's something
Well,
that tends to happen.
And just to explain that too, what I mean by that is not necessarily that it's being willfully ignored. It's that sometimes, and you don't have to have a degree in order to understand
Oh,
it either.
absolutely,
It's a matter of being aware.
Yeah.
Being aware and being willing. And like I said, this is not just a singer issue per se. I mean, I use the example of the singer just because we're talking about that collaboration, and there tends to be, unfortunately, I don't like it to be that way, but there tends to be a gap between singers and instrumentalists, you know, and there doesn't have to be. I mean, you know, that's the idea, that you're in a collaborative environment. You're creating.
Yeah, you can be one more musician. You can be a musician. You can be a part of the band. But of course, you have to want to be a part of the band. You have to want to express yourself musically and prioritize that. For me, it's very, very important. I am a musician first and a singer after.
We should all be musicians first, and then play whatever it is that we're playing.
It's way more fun. So.
Yes, and because you're already connected to the music. So, as far as, again, kind of our emphasis here is how we work with this in this collaboration. So, I would say some of the things we talked about, right? Check your ego at the door. Be open to somebody else's ideas. Serve the song, right?
Absolutely.
Write for the song. Having a concept to start with is actually a really good idea. It doesn't have to start with a poem that somebody else wrote. It can be your own poem. It can be just even an idea. But I think that helps direct where you're going with things.
Absolutely.
Let's see, what else?
I mean, and I would add that all of this, it only works if you also do your personal work.
Yes.
Both of us, we work on our individual musicianship, right? Both of us, we practice. Both of us, we listen to a lot of music. We are always curious about other artists and what's new coming up. And so all of this can happen if you cultivate your individual musician.
Exactly. That's very, very important. It's something, you know, I've mentioned in some of the master classes, my band that I play with, my other project, that you are, you know, kind of just as part of that, you know, because when you play with us, with La Lucha, it's like it's very easy because we're all on the same page.
It's so much fun.
And yeah, and
It's fun.
and it's the same concept, you know. We all trust each other.
Yeah.
We all just know where things are going to go. We know what to throw at each other, and of course, I've been playing with those guys for 15 years, you know. Whereas you sometimes may feel like, okay, I kind of have to see where I fit in here. But, you know, we always encourage you to be like, hey, no, just you're part of the band, you know, you're another musician on the bandstand. Let's bring some stuff. And we do, sometimes we collaborate with the wonderful trumpet player James Suggs as well, and it's the same thing. It's all this trust, this hey, let's make music happen. But we're always playing for the music. It's not for just our egos.
Yes,
really. It's not about ourselves. It's not about, you know, it's again, it's the sum of the parts. It's the team effort.
And that's what makes the difference, I think. That's what makes you connect with the people and create something that makes sense.
Exactly. And people, the audience actually can actually perceive that, where the energy of something came from and all that. Do we have anything else to say about this song? Sorry, we're checking our notes. So I think next week we're going to talk about arranging. And this song, like we mentioned earlier, this was kind of the skeleton. You know, there's no real improvisation in what we showed you earlier. But we will incorporate some of that.
Yes.
In some way, we don't know yet.
Exactly. We are going to arrange our own composition for the next class, which is going to talk about arranging in a collaborative environment.
In a collaborative environment, exactly. And not only about that song, but we have we have other, we've arranged, because, you know, sometimes when you talk about arranging, usually you're referring to getting grabbing a pre-existing composition and arranging it in a specific way. Now that brings me to one thing we talked about mentioning, which was writing, to kind of explain that when we say the skeleton is precisely that. It's having something that works at a basic level, and then put your arranger hat on.
Yeah, and develop it.
Exactly. So it's kind of like you're kind of done composing. Again, we'll expand more on this next week, but you're kind of done composing, because I think the issue sometimes that I found is that when I try to arrange and compose at the same time, I end up with something much more complex.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's good to walk away from, you know, like with this song in particular, as the day went, we were both independently listening to it, and we kind of sent a message like, hey, I really like this song, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that when you do it this way, when you first compose, you work on the skeleton, you work on your concept, and then you arrange. You come up with something more authentic. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
because
organic.
when you're arranging, organic, yes. Because when you're arranging, you're already working on that concept. You're already working on that idea. It's not like everything is getting mixed up, and you can have, you said, like too complex things. You can end up with something too complex or something or too noisy.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's the issue that we have, especially, and I think this is not unique to jazz musicians, but as jazz musicians, the thing is that our ears tend to get very advanced, and we tend to be able to hear much more complex stuff than the average listener in a much simpler way. It sounds simpler to our ears, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And you gotta be careful, and at least that's how we see it. I think that we also have to, like, there's a lot of ways to understand music, and and all of them are valid. For us, it's very important to connect with the audience. And we have to be very careful of finding the balance between what our ears hear and what the audience ears are gonna hear. So do something that it's interesting to us and that it's fun for us, but at the same time that it's clean, so it connects with the people. So the message really gets...
Exactly, comes across.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, that's a point that I think, regardless of what type of music, again, just to clarify, we're not saying that writing complex music is bad. No, we're saying it's just sometimes you can overwrite, you know, and sometimes, and again, we'll expand a little bit more on that next week when we talk specifically about arranging. And we say that from our own experience, because we've all over-arranged like crazy.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
And it's a learning process. That's the thing.
Yes.
Self-awareness,
Yes.
without putting yourself down,
Yes.
is very important.
Absolutely.
Growth, commitment to growth, commit to grow.
Yeah.
So
Who you are as a person makes a difference in who you are as a musician, for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll expand more on that.
Yeah.
You know, because we can talk forever. I can talk
He
forever.
can talk forever.
Wait a second. But we'll expand some more next week, and I think that's what we have for today.
Yeah.
No, it was really, really a great session. It's almost, I'm listening to you guys today, and as much as this was a session about collaboration and composition, there was this underlying theme that I thought was really interesting and got me thinking about the relationship of music and poetry, because you used it to sort of illustrate a lot of these points. And so I was jotting down some notes to talk to you about that, if I could, before we kind of sign off here, about that and about poetry and music and how poetry can inspire songwriting, because it has in this particular instance. And so a couple of the things that I picked up on were that there are a lot of similarities. Certainly rhythm was something that both of you pointed out, this is employed to create this emotion, both in poetry and in songwriting. And then Ona kind of highlighted the importance of, in poetry, there's sort of these like poetic devices. It's like about how the words are said and spacing. And, I thought that was really interesting too, in terms of how it can be instructive as you are trying to develop a song, using some similar devices to poetry. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, like for aspiring songwriters or students that are trying to do that. How do you both read poetry regularly, and do you look to it to inspire you about songwriting, or should we?
Yes. I personally, I love poetry. I read poetry. I have been reading poetry all my life, and I write poetry as well. So for me, poetry is one of my greatest inspirations, because it has everything. It has the rhythm intertwined with the words, and also there's a lot of kinds of poetry, but I like a lot like symbolic poetry. So yeah, I definitely think we all should listen to read poetry.
I personally, I used to read poetry a lot more when I was younger. I have 3 kids now, so it gets a little chaotic to do those things. But when we started doing this project, we talked about, Ona's been getting me to read some more stuff that we've talked about. I get inspired by concepts a lot, and but it's really, I read a lot. I do read a lot, even though it's not poetry. But I do get inspired by concepts, events, ideas, feelings. Like that you have, things that are sometimes they're rooted in my real life, and sometimes they're rooted on kind of not fantasy, but fiction. Just the concept. I used to play a lot of heavy metal, and some of the writing on that stuff is very kind of like from epics, from like it's all this stuff. But I do think reading, and so poetry, like Ona said, that's a great thing. It's all there. There's already, like she said, there's different types of poetry, but there's a rhythm already. There's already a sort of structure made for song, made for songs. I mean, which one came first? It's kind of that thing. I think they intertwine so closely. And if you listen to some of the older standards, there's some songs that are just like, the lyrics are just like poetry. They're really, really, involved. They're very much a part of the song. And the way to connect those things, again, I think, and you can expand more on this, since Steve was saying about the advice to give people is, I would say, try to see how what you read makes you feel, and try to find a melodic or harmonic way to express that, a similar way to express that, kind of like what we talked about a little bit at the beginning. Like, I read the poem and said, I feel this way, and I wasn't thinking of the specific words, but of the overall feeling of the poem. That as an instrumentalist was one thing that inspired me.
Yeah.
Do you
I
have
agree with
some to
everything
add?
you said. No, I agree with everything. I don't know if I have anything to
Well,
add
Ona,
to that.
let me ask you this, Ona. So if we always stress with these sessions, how important listening to music is, with whatever the topic has been, but I don't know if there has been a session where we've talked about reading. And I'm always inspired and impressed because I read and watch a lot about various musicians who comment often on what they are reading and how what they are reading has inspired them. So wouldn't you agree that reading may be as equally as important to the creative process?
Absolutely. It's so important that you get inspiration from life, not only from music. Of course, from music, right? But there's this great book, The Artist's Path. I don't know if you have heard about it, but
I haven't.
it's a really cool book that I recommend to all of you who want to work on your creativity. It's a book. It's like a workbook about creativity. It's really, really useful, very interesting. And it has, even if you don't want to follow the steps of the book, it has a lot of very important content. And one of the things she says is, like, you gotta have a date with your artist at least once a week. And it has to be in another discipline than your main discipline. So if you're a musician, you gotta have one date a week at least, doing something that inspires your artist. Go to a museum, go to the beach, go read a book, whatever it is that inspires you. But you gotta nurture your creativity with things that are outside of your discipline, but that connect with your art. And I found that was so enlightening to me. That was really, really important. And I get inspired by literature. I get inspired by nature. I get inspired by art. So many things. Poetry, more specifically, for me, it's amazing because it has the visual part, especially in more symbolic poetry, right? It has a visual part of describing, like using metaphors. You're imagining something very well, or at least that's how I see it, right? I see the poetry in my head. And you also have, as we were saying, the words, and you have the rhythm. And that's a very good way to just nurture your musicianship as well.
No, that's very cool. And I know we're running a little bit long on time, but I just want to ask Alejandro this on as far as instrumental music is concerned, right? and its relationship to poetry. Poetry has certainly been an inspiration for jazz and instrumental music, but do you think of it in the same way as, poetic devices used and employed with how words are expressed on paper? How can that translate to instrumental creativity?
Absolutely. That is a very interesting thing. When we were translating the poem, there's words in Spanish that we were trying to say, like, okay, what does this mean in English? Is this the true meaning? I think she clarified, like, sueño. It can be being sleepy or the act of sleeping or a dream, right? They're both related, but they're not the same. And I think you can kind of have a little bit of that duality with music too. I'll use an example, even though he didn't like to be bunched into this whole thing, but impressionistic composers, like Debussy, Claude Debussy, or sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I know there's Debussy, but he was kind of part of the impressionistic movement. And what I always dug, that's something that resonated with me a lot when I learned about it, because impressionism is about the first impression, which you may not get the perfect, you may not get a picture perfect idea of every detail of what you just saw, be it a painting, being a person, being an encounter, it can be anything. You get an idea of what you saw, and you seem to have a clear idea, but when you try to get deeper and deeper into details, you may realize that you don't know all of those details. So when you listen to some of his piano pieces, for example, he liked to play kind of very open sounding, ambiguous sounding pieces. His harmony was very kind of open. That actually translates to a lot of jazz. I hear a lot of that in Bill Evans, for example, who was like a master of harmony and voicings on the piano. And you kind of get this feeling of like, is this what I think it is, or is this something else? You get an idea. It is what it is. It is something. Again, this is an art movement. So if you see Monet or you like Starry Night, right? You see it's the sky, and you see things, but you don't see specific details. You can see the idea of something, but there's no definition to it. And that's a thing that's really cool to use as a device in music, amongst many other things. Sometimes you want to be very clear about what you want to express and say, like, this is what this is. And sometimes you can use that duality of poetry in words that mean different things, and you can see how instrumentally you can translate that. To go back to what I said about Jacob Collier, that he talks about, one of the concepts he talks about is negative harmony. And it's, I'm not going to get into that here. There's like a million videos of that on YouTube if you want to check it out. But it's the same idea. It's like how to express a feeling, how to express a word, how to express something that you're feeling at a particular moment, or how something makes you feel. So yeah, I think you can definitely get inspiration from those things, and even it can be like the meter. You can use the rhythm of something, if just to create an instrumental idea. So there's so many cool ways to get inspired by, like Ona said, not just poetry but other arts, And poetry is something that definitely I want to explore it more. Like I said, I used to read more of it, but now I'm getting back into it, and there's some really cool stuff in there that you can use.
Yeah, no, that is really great. Anything else, guys, before we turn off for the day and look forward to the next one? We really appreciate you guys being with us.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, and we will be releasing an album very soon. Actually, I just mentioned that we have other original compositions that we've done in the same kind of process in that album.
Our first single is gonna come up on April 23rd.
23rd, yeah.
Yeah, 23rd.
April 23rd, first single for Orilla.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we'll post that all over social media. You'll get tired of us, and
Never. Well,
Thank you.
It means a lot that you've continued to participate in these growing Young Lions sessions. People know that after these live sessions, the recordings are archived in the studio online, clearwaterjazz.com, and also on the podcast. And we're doing so many that we're kind of backlogged in getting them all up there timely. But that's great because we're growing this treasure that's free and accessible to anyone that wants to listen to it. So again, we thank our partners, Duke Energy and Blue Water Wealth Management at Steward Partners, Marine Max, for helping to present those online resources. And Alejandro and Ona, thank you so much for being part of these. We look forward to the next one on arranging with you. I think it's arranging, right, that we're going to be doing next? Yeah. And that people can find the link to join that one up on the upcoming sessions. So we will see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, bye.